What if I told you that one quiet neighborhood in New York hides stories of secret tunnels, mafia meetings, early aviation dreams, and immigrant struggles that shaped an entire community? Yet most people walking its streets today have no idea. Welcome to Ozone Park, a place that might look like a normal neighborhood in Queens, but behind its modest homes and busy avenues lies a history full of ambition, mystery, and survival. To understand Ozone Park, we have to go back to the late 1800s. At that time, this area was mostly farmland and open land on the outskirts of New York City. Investors and developers began advertising the land as a healthy place to live, far from the crowded and polluted parts of Manhattan and Brooklyn. The name Ozone Park was actually chosen for marketing reasons. Developers claimed the area had fresh, clean air rich in ozone, something they believed would attract families looking for a healthier life. Whether the air truly had more ozone or not is debatable, but the name worked. People began moving here, buying small plots of land and building modest homes. Many of them were working-class immigrants who dreamed of stability and a better future for their children. By the early 1900s, Ozone Park was growing quickly. Streets were laid out, small businesses opened, and the neighborhood started developing its own identity. But one thing that really transformed the area was transportation. When the elevated train line, what later became part of the subway system, reached nearby neighborhoods, it connected residents to Manhattan and other parts of the city. Suddenly, people could live in Ozone Park and still work in the busy economic centers of New York. The quiet neighborhood became a gateway between the city and suburban life. But not all of Ozone Park's history is peaceful and ordinary. During the early and mid-20th century, the neighborhood quietly became connected to one of the most infamous chapters of New York's past: organized crime. Ozone Park and nearby neighborhoods became home to several powerful members of the New York Mafia. One of the most famous figures connected to the area was John Gotti, who later became known as the boss of the Gambino crime family. In the 1970s and 1980s, Gotti and his associates were known to frequent places around Ozone Park and nearby Howard Beach. For many residents, this was a strange reality. On one hand, it was a quiet family neighborhood with kids playing in the streets and neighbors helping each other. On the other hand, some of the most powerful organized crime figures in America were living just blocks away. There are stories from longtime residents who remember seeing luxury cars pulling up to modest homes, or men in sharp suits quietly gathering at local social clubs. To outsiders, it might have seemed suspicious, but for locals, it became almost normal. One particularly interesting story comes from the 1980s. A small social club near the neighborhood became a regular meeting spot for members of the Gambino family. Federal investigators eventually placed the location under heavy surveillance, trying to capture conversations that could expose criminal activities. For months, agents watched who came and went, slowly piecing together the hidden network of power operating in plain sight. But Ozone Park's story isn't only about crime. In fact, the neighborhood has a much deeper and more inspiring history tied to immigration and community. Throughout the 20th century, waves of immigrants arrived here searching for opportunity. Italian families were among the earliest groups to settle in large numbers, building tight-knit communities centered around churches, bakeries, and family-owned businesses. Later, other immigrant groups began arriving as well. South Asian, Caribbean, and Latino communities gradually added new cultures, foods, and traditions to the neighborhood. What started as a mostly Italian area slowly transformed into one of the most diverse communities in Queens. And with diversity came new stories. There is a well-known story among longtime residents about a small family grocery store that opened decades ago by an immigrant family who arrived with almost nothing. The owners worked long hours every day, often sleeping only a few hours at night while trying to keep the business alive. In the beginning, customers were few. Some days they barely made enough to cover expenses, but they kept going, slowly building trust in the neighborhood. Over time, the store became more than just a place to buy food. It became a gathering spot where neighbors talked, shared news, and supported one another. Years later, the children of that family went on to become doctors, engineers, and business owners. It's a small story, but it represents the spirit of Ozone Park: resilience, hard work, and hope. Another fascinating part of the area's past involves aviation history. Not far from Ozone Park once stood an early racetrack called Aqueduct Racetrack, which opened in 1894. The racetrack became one of the most famous horse racing venues in the country. Wealthy spectators, gamblers, and celebrities traveled from all over to watch races there. But during World War II, something unexpected happened. The racetrack was temporarily converted into a military facility used for training and logistics. The wide open land and existing infrastructure made it useful for wartime operations. After the war ended, the racetrack returned to horse racing and remains active today. For many residents, the racetrack became a major landmark and employer, bringing jobs and visitors to the area for generations. Ozone Park also played a role in another chapter of New York history, the growth of the subway system. The extension of transit lines helped transform Queens from rural land into thriving neighborhoods. Without those rail connections, places like Ozone Park might never have developed the way they did. Yet despite all this history, Ozone Park has managed to maintain a strong sense of community. Even today, many families have lived here for generations. Some residents can trace their family homes back 60 or even 80 years. Old photos still hang in living rooms, showing dirt roads where paved streets exist today. He remembered neighbors leaving their doors unlocked and children playing outside until the streetlights came on. He said something that perfectly captures the spirit of Ozone Park. He said, "The buildings may change, the people may change, but the feeling of community here never disappears." And maybe that's the most powerful part of Ozone Park's untold history. It's not just about mafia stories, racetracks, or subway lines. It's about ordinary people who built lives here generation after generation. People who arrived with dreams, faced challenges, and slowly turned a patch of farmland into a living, breathing neighborhood. Today, when you walk through Ozone Park, you might just see busy streets, restaurants, homes, and shops. But beneath those streets lies more than a century of hidden stories. Stories of ambition, struggle, mystery, and resilience. And the truth is, every corner of this neighborhood probably holds another story waiting to be discovered.